Every entrepreneur I've ever met needs to be told, hey, you don't have to do everything all at once and right away. And if you slow down a little bit and you take care of yourself and you understand yourself better, you're going to make better decisions and end up in a better place. It's a really hard way to look at like entrepreneurship, because the easiest thing to believe is I need to kill myself to make this successful. That's one of the big challenges with relationships. You know, as adults, we model what we had as children. And so if you had a childhood that was chaotic and difficult and frustrating, chances are your adult life right now is chaotic and frustrating and difficult. And so for us as adults, processing the trauma of our childhoods, which everybody has, like 100% of human beings have experienced trauma, 100% of human beings have experienced disconnection. And when we understand those things and we start saying, how am I replicating that in my life right now? That's when things really change. There's a lot of people running businesses today that think that that's like the most important thing in their lives. And it might be right now. But at the same time, when we focus only on that and we don't focus on ourselves and we don't focus on what we want and what we want out of life, it can become super challenging. But she confided in me early in the program that she didn't know what she needed to do because she had a chronic issue. She was actually internal bleeding in her stomach. She was having trouble eating. She was losing weight. Then she was gaining weight. She'd been working with doctors for like a decade, calming her life down, stopping the hustle, putting more focus on what was important. All of those symptoms went away, and of course, her business exploded.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Breaking Boundaries with Aditi. And this is the podcast where we go beyond businesses into mind, momentum, relationships, and missions of extraordinary entrepreneurs who are actually redefining what success truly means. And today I'm truly honored to be able to have with me someone whose work has been able to impact thousands of entrepreneurs, all across the world. He's the author of The Entrepreneurial Personality Type, co-founder of Simple Operations, and host of the Momentum podcast. He's built and scaled multiple million-dollar companies, all while helping others build predictable, scalable, and freedom-driven businesses. So please welcome Alex Charfen, a leader, a teacher, and a voice of every entrepreneur who's ever felt different but destined for something bigger. First of all, welcome to this podcast. I'm very excited to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm excited to be here as well.
Yeah. Awesome. By the way, have you ever been to India?
No.
So this is like, do you want to come to India ever?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. The opportunity hasn't presented itself. I just got back from Rome and from Italy. And so we do some travel, but India's never been one of those places where we've gotten on the calendar yet.
Yeah, definitely. You should be here. Before this happening live, me and Alex were having conversations about relationships. All right. So we were talking about, relationships, and the first question that popped into your mind was like, Aditi, are you in a relationship? So any particular reason, you wanted to ask me that?
Why did I ask you that? Well, just to get context, so I've taken the last year and a half, a little bit more than that, off. And prior to that, I started studying relationships probably 5 or 6 years ago. But what I really was studying was sex, intimacy, and relationships. I think studying relationships without studying sex is like studying business without studying finances. It's like so part of what you need to understand.
Right.
And so, yeah, I just asked you that question to establish context if you were in a relationship. So now I know you're 27, you're single, and you're waiting to meet the right guy.
Yeah. And I think this could be a masterclass for me, maybe.
Maybe.
So I'd love to understand, since you've been married for over 20 years now, and we were just having this conversation, how is it like? Because, when you're starting off, like as someone like me, we are very in the hustle mode. We want to be able to work as much as possible because obviously we do have that energy right now. But I've seen my parents also, the energy decreases over a period of time and you start to focus on other things, right? First of all, what age did you get married?
I was 30. But I think that there's like I'd like to like maybe challenge one of the interpretations you just made that over time, like your energy goes down. I don't know if that's true. I think that over time, as you get older, especially as an entrepreneur and you understand more, you just work more efficiently. You work more effectively. You can get way more done with way less effort. And so I think there's this like feeling among younger people that if I don't do it now, I'll never be able to do it. And if I don't like spend all my time working right now, I'll never be able to like have the success that I want. And I think what happens to far too many entrepreneurs is we become very one-dimensional and we focus only on business, and we don't focus on ourselves. We don't focus on developing ourselves. We focus on like, how can I get the numbers? How can I grow the business? How can I do this one thing? And that creates like a level of one-dimensionality, and putting a tremendous amount of focus on something's good. But if it's the only thing you're focused on, often it can become very myopic. You become too like closed off to any other possibilities. And so I think there's a lot of people running businesses today that think that that's like the most important thing in their lives. And it might be right now. It might be when you're just starting out. It might be the most important thing. It might be something that's really urgent. But at the same time, when we focus only on that and we don't focus on ourselves and we don't focus on what we want and what we want out of life, it can become super challenging.
You just mentioned that just focusing on this one thing, you're trying to, close all the other possibilities of your life. Like, what do you mean? Like, what kind of possibilities that you've probably experienced and you'd like to share some incidents?
I think that when you look at the entrepreneurial world today, one of the things that the general public, or like one of the opinions that's out there, is that if you're not hurting yourself, if you're not punishing yourself, if you're not working so hard that you can barely make it, then you're not doing enough. And I think that's definitely one way to look at it. Entrepreneurship requires hustle, and it definitely requires energy, and it definitely requires us to like lean in and do things we've never had done before. But I also think that this focus on being the only thing you're doing and getting up and strapping yourself to a computer all day and like not doing anything else is really challenging. I've seen videos where people say things like, if you're doing anything other than growing your business, you're wasting your time. Or if you're putting effort anywhere else, you're not doing the right thing. And if you're in your 20s and you're not working 100 hours a week, then you're not doing the right thing. And I think a lot of that is entrepreneurs just carrying forward the same self-punishment that we had for ourselves. A lot of the reason that we work that hard and a lot of the reason that we do all of that is not just because we want to be successful, but it's because we're trying to fill a void. We're trying to fill some challenge, some frustration that we have with ourselves with some level of success. And when you slow down and focus on the people around you and focus on developing yourself and put some time and energy and effort into yourself, the business will get better. I think just focusing there can really start to cause massive challenges for people.
Don't you think that every successful entrepreneur has been insecure about it all the time?
I think being a successful entrepreneur carries with it a very high level of insecurity. I think that's just how it is. I mean, as entrepreneurs, we do things that most people wouldn't do. We put up with risks that people wouldn't put up with, most people wouldn't put up with. We on challenges most people wouldn't take on. And so inherent in that, there's a level of insecurity and unknown that is just being an entrepreneur.
So during this, obviously you've had your own highs and lows in your business journey. How did you manage your relationship with that?
Honestly, in the past, not very well. I did what a lot of entrepreneurs do, and it's not something I'm proud of, but I put most of the focus and attention into my business. My wife and I worked together, and so both of us put a lot of focus and attention in the business, and we made a huge mistake. We allowed the momentum in the business to become the momentum in our marriage. So if business was going good, the marriage was going good. If business wasn't going good, the marriage wasn't going good. That's not okay. And what happened was over time, we realized this and we decoupled our marriage from the business. So the business stood on its own and the momentum in our marriage was its own as well. We put process in place in our marriage. We put structure in place. I put structure in place in our marriage so that Katie and I would have connection and that we would have time together. And it wasn't just a myopic focus on the business.
What specific action steps, that you took in order to bring that structure in? Because let's say you go out on a dinner date and you end up talking about business. You go out somewhere, you end up talking about business. Something clicks up in your mind and your partner is just there and you end up talking about business.
Yeah, that definitely happens if you have nothing else to focus on, and if you have nothing else to think about. And so what structure that Katie and I put in place was we started setting personal goals around what we wanted as a couple and where we wanted improvement as a couple. we started focusing on sex and intimacy and like really improving sex and intimacy, which is the biggest cheat code for developing yourself. Because a lot of times we want to focus on our relationship or we want to focus on the business, but all of us have shadows. All of us have triggers. All of us have trauma. We all have stuff that we're working through from our childhood, depending on where you are and what culturally happened. Like there's all kinds of things that every human being is working through. And for the two of us, when we focused right on sex and intimacy and getting closer as a couple and experiencing more love together as a couple, that brought up triggers that allowed us to go process. And for me, it brought up triggers that showed me where I still had work to do. I think one of the challenges with relationships is people want relationships to be this like exciting, fun, everything's great, everything's fine. Like we've all seen the movies where you're supposed to feel like you find this person and everything in your life gets better. Well, part of that is true. Yes, everything in your life does get better, but having a close relationship where you're proximal to someone, where you're with someone every day, it's going to bring up your childhood triggers. It's going to bring up challenges, especially when it comes to sex and intimacy. I think most of us are just little kids running around in adult bodies, triggered and trying to figure things out. And as you really focus on sex and intimacy and what comes up gets handled, you start getting more in your body. You start getting more present. You start getting more aware. And the relationship improves like crazy. But here's what's interesting. When you focus on, it's not linear. It doesn't feel like it makes sense. But I've coached hundreds and hundreds of business owners, and a lot of those were couples. And when we were coaching business owners, you said I'm the co-founder of Simple Operations, which is true. We've since sold the company. My friend Gabe Arnold runs it now. But in that company, we used to coach a lot of couples. And what we saw over and over again was if we put systems in the business, things got better. But if we put systems in the marriage, if we made it so that they were aligning every day and they were talking every day and they had space and time every day, the business would get better. So no effort on the business, focus on the relationship and the business gets better. And I think that's one of those things that entrepreneurs don't understand. Like your primary relationship in life is your secure base. This is all attachment theory. As human beings, we want to be securely attached to somebody, and you can't do it by yourself. There's three things that can be a secure attachment. God, my relationship with God has never been strong enough to be my secure attachment. I wish it was. It probably is now, but it wasn't ever before in my life. The second party that can be a secure attachment is your parents. My parents were not a very secure attachment. And the third is your significant other relationship. And for me, with Katie, my focus was how can we make this the most secure relationship in both of our lives? Because when you do that, when you have that security, when you have that confidence that there's someone who knows you, who sees you, Katie and I have talked about everything. I don't hide anything from her. There are no secrets whatsoever. There's something magical and so powerful of having someone in your life that knows everything about you, that knows your history, that understands where you've been, that understands the mistakes you've made, that understands the challenges you've had, that understands your preferences, your kinks, your interests, like all of those things, and accepts them and accepts you for who you are. That changes how you walk into every room. That changes the confidence with which you approach everything in life.
Crazy. Hopefully to experience it someday.
Well, you should.
Yeah. I've always seen relationships like maybe it would make me lose my focus on business because I'd have to put effort in a relationship. I'll have to go out on dates. I'll have to talk to the person. I'd rather work.
What's your relationship with your parents like?
It's good, like normal, not so bad or not the best.
Yeah. What's their relationship with each other like?
Average.
Yeah, so you had a relationship model that was average. It probably was not aspirational. When you look at your parents, you don't say, oh, I really want to have what they have, do you?
No.
No. So see, that's the challenge for a lot of us. I had similar. My parents stayed married, but when I was younger, there wasn't a lot of connection there. There wasn't a lot of depth there, and I felt it. And so for a long time, I didn't think relationships were important. And I think that's one of the big challenges with relationships. As adults, we model what we had as children. In fact, when you look at really the psychology behind how we live as human beings is we will recreate the energetic of our childhood until we understand it and can step out of it. And so if you had a childhood that was chaotic and difficult and frustrating, chances are your adult life right now is chaotic and frustrating and difficult. If you had a childhood where there wasn't a lot of secure relationships and there wasn't a lot of attachment and there wasn't a lot of transparency and and clarity, you probably have an adult life where those things aren't present. And so for us as adults, processing the trauma of our childhoods, which everybody has, like, we just need to get over it and understand that, like, it's part of everybody's life. 100% of human beings have experienced trauma. 100% of human beings have experienced disconnection. 100% of human beings have experienced insecurity and detachment. And when we understand those things and we start saying, how am I replicating that in my life right now? That's when things really change. And the reason I asked you about your parents is when somebody is not really excited about getting into a relationship, chances are they haven't had a good relationship model. Kind of goes one of two ways. They're either not interested in getting in a relationship, or it's the only thing that matters to them because they didn't see it when they were younger and now they want this ideal thing. Either way, the key is understanding what conditioning we have and what we've taken on around relationships, processing that with somebody professionally, and then being able to move forward for ourselves.
So most entrepreneurs are really ambitious, right? Like, everyone is, because they're always thinking about, oh, somebody is not ambitious or somebody is not that goal oriented when it comes to that career. It's like a turn off for them. So because of that, they actually get closed off by a lot of people already.
Oh, I agree. I think a lot of entrepreneurs judge the people around them and create space with the people around them and don't see the people around them because we have this metric, like, are you running a business and how much is it making and how well is it doing? And like, that's all that matters. And that is so painfully one-dimensional. It's so sad because we get into this place where we look at the whole world through these glasses of like, hey, are you running a business and doing well or not? And I think, if you get really still and quiet and you ask yourself, what do you want in a partner? What's going to like change your life? What's going to make you feel like you are accepted and whole? And what's going to make you feel validated? Very low on that list is going to be the person's running a business. I mean, maybe you want somebody who's ambitious or who wants to be successful, but when you get really clear on what you want, that like you need to be running a business probably isn't going to be like the top thing.
So how did you manage that?
I actually coach people to do the same thing I did. So when I was in my 20s, I was in a really challenging relationship and I had been engaged, and it was with someone who I didn't understand at the time, but it was actually when I went to see a therapist afterwards, he told me I was in an abusive relationship and I didn't even know men could be abused. I was confused. He said, you've been in an abusive relationship. And I thought he was saying I was abusing the woman. I'm like, oh my gosh, Jesus, tell me what I did. And he's like, no. You were in an abusive relationship. I was with a woman who said one thing and did another. There was a lot of deception. There was a lot of manipulation. And so I got out of that relationship and it kind of put me sideways. And so in my 20s, I'm 52 now, but in my 20s, like 26, 27, I went and started doing EMDR therapy to try and process like the reactivity and the frustration and the lack of sleep, and all kinds of things happened when I got out of that relationship. It made it really hard just to like exist. And in doing EMDR therapy, which I highly recommend to everybody, I was able to process that stuff and lower the energy around it and get more clear and change my perspective. And I didn't do therapy solid for 3 years, but I went on and off. And then after a while, I went and I was in a place where I was in that relationship, then dated for a while, and then I just wanted to stop. I just wanted like space. I stopped dating. I stopped even looking. I focused on myself. I started working out. I was running my business. Things were going well for me, and I had no interest in like anything. But the therapist that I was working with encouraged me to make a list of 10 things that I wanted in a partner. He's like, look, if she shows up, you want to know that she's there. So like write out the things because you might run into this person. And so we spent a couple hours in therapy working on a list of 10 things. And it was interesting because one of the first things I mentioned was I want her to be attractive. And my therapist was like, don't even write that down. You're not going to even approach someone you're not attracted to. Like, don't waste one of the things on attractiveness. Like, what are the most important things? And I really spent time with it. And I wrote down things like, she needs to be able to live outside the lines. I'm not a 9-to-5 person. I never will be. I want somebody who's adventurous. I want somebody who really validates me and sees me. I want somebody who, really puts time and effort and energy into the relationship. I want someone who understands who they are and is willing to improve themselves. Like I'm a different person every year. I do so much research and studying and changing and modifying. Like I needed someone who would grow with me. And so I made this list of 10 things. And then I put it in my wallet and I would read it every once in a while, and I kind of ignored it. And about 8 or 9 months into the sabbatical that I was on from like not dating, I went to an event in Tampa for work where I was on television with Home Shopping Network. And then I got off and we went to a restaurant and I met my wife at the restaurant. We were sitting at the bar and eating. And within about an hour of talking to her, I knew she was going to be the person I was going to marry because she checked every box and I was crazy about her like instantly. We exchanged numbers. She flew back to Texas. I flew back to South Florida. Neither one of us lived where we met. And she called me back after a couple weeks and we started. It took a while for her to call me back because she was dating somebody. She ended that first and then called me back. And she ended up coming out to Florida to visit me like 6 weeks later. We talked every day on the phone. Our shortest call was probably an hour. And by the time she got to Florida, the first night that she was there, I told her like I wanted to marry her and that we didn't have to tell anybody else. And was she willing to do the same thing? And she was. And that's how it worked for us. I mean, it wasn't perfect. Believe me, we had a lot of challenges in our relationship. But when I met her, because I was already clear on what I wanted, I knew she was the one.
That's amazing. So the first step is to have complete clarity on what you want.
Yeah, and this works. You know, I've coached a lot of people that were single and frustrated and wanted to find somebody, but they didn't really know what they were looking for. And so, you know, it's interesting. Earlier this year, I officiated a wedding. I married a couple of friends of mine, Marley Jackson, Steve Larson. And at that wedding, I saw an old friend of mine. I'm not going to tell you who she is because she hasn't given me permission to share this story. But we were talking and she was like really frustrated with being single. Here she is at a wedding. She was frustrated with being single. She's been single for too long. She was trying to get out of her masculine and into her feminine. She'd been running businesses for a long time. She intimidated men. It was like really frustrating for her. And so I told her, let's jump on a call after the wedding and let's just get clear on what you want. And so we jumped on a call and we had about an hour-long conversation. And I asked her, what are you looking for? And she said things like, I want a man who's protective. I want a man who puts me first. I want a man who knows who he is. I want a man who's willing to improve himself. Like she wrote really, really good things. And then I sent them to her and she had the list. And I told her, like, here's what I would suggest. Every day, take a minute and raise your energy a little bit, like breathe or dance or do something to increase your vibration, increase your energy. Then read that list, then put it away and just keep it in your mind. And I don't know how long it was later, but it was not that long, maybe 6 weeks later or maybe 8 weeks later. I got a message from her and she's like, hey, this worked. And I'm like, it doesn't normally work this fast. And she said, yeah, it's crazy. There's somebody in my life who's been there forever that once I made this list, he showed up and I totally saw him differently. And maybe he saw me differently too because he asked me out. And because I had the list, I'm like, yes, let's go out. And she said, you know, we've gone out several times now, and it feels like this is exactly what I was looking for. And I think a lot of times we're not clear on what we're looking for, so it doesn't show up. And if you get clarity, you kind of magnetize that intention into the universe and bring it to you.
Most people don't have that clarity, but what exercises do you suggest to bring that on?
I mean, it's not that hard. You get still and you ask yourself, what do you really want? You know, like I'll ask you. You're not in a relationship now, and it's not something that you've made a priority. But if you think about a relationship, what's important to you?
The first thing is respect and loyalty, that he should be able to, respect my work and understand if I'm reacting to a certain situation in a certain way, it's not about him, it's mostly about work. So I value my family a lot, and I think I will value someone else's family a lot as well. And I expect the same thing from him, that, the family relationships that I have, I value them a lot. Third is I want someone who's not too possessive, but not too carefree also. Like somewhere in between, the right balance. You should know when to speak what.
Give me more on that last one. It's not clear enough. You don't want to confuse your subconscious. You want clear statements.
So if I'm talking to a guy, he should be able to trust me enough. But if the guy is not right for me, he should know and should be man enough to tell me on my face rather than like spying and doing all of that.
I still don't understand. What would the quality be that the person would have?
Not possessive and protective.
So not possessive, but protective.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you want them to make you feel?
Fulfilled.
How will they do that?
Like just listen to me, not try to solve my problems, but be there. And if I ask for help, just come and help me. And I would do the same.
Those are awesome. What else?
Yeah. I'm just unable to think of more
Okay,
quality.
well, let's take a deep breath and think about if there was somebody in your life, what else would you want to feel or experience or have in your life because that person's there?
Travel with that person all across the world, live in a van somewhere, and not care about what's the place like, but just enjoy the time.
All right, so I think you need to have 10, but you have 5 that are pretty good. So what you're looking for is someone who's willing to be respectful and loyal and hold space for you. Someone who values family and sees those in relationships as important. Someone who's not possessive, which is like over controlling, but is protective, who's looking out for you and understands where you are and what's going on. Someone who makes you feel fulfilled by listening to you when you need to be heard, but not trying to solve it unless you ask, which, by the way, man, if I could just teach all men how to do that, everything would change. And then the last thing is someone who travels and is willing to like have a different type of life, live in a van, enjoy the time, doesn't have to have everything,
Yeah,
but just there in the space with you.
yeah,
So those are your first 5. You have 5 more.
yeah.
But if you go through this exercise and you're willing to write this down and you read it a couple of times a week, things in your life might change.
I would do that.
I'd love to hear how it goes.
Yeah, I would definitely do that. So this is like how the exercise that you give to all of your clients as well.
Yeah, we called it the list of 10, and it just works. We have them get really quiet, and it's not just for a relationship. It works really well in this case, but we used to do it with like, what do you want the business to look like? What do you want your personal life to look like? What do you want your body to look like? What do you want, like, whatever improvement you're going to make, get really clear on it. And I think one of the challenges that we have as entrepreneurs is we want to set like a goal that's a number or something like that. And oftentimes, like there's subjective things that are totally different. So when we had people do the list of 10 for their business, you know, what most entrepreneurs do when you say, what do you want from your business? They start quoting numbers. I want it to be $1
Yeah.
million. I want 30% revenue. I want this many clients. I want this many. Well, yeah, but what do you really want from the business? And so when we would have people get quiet and put a list of 10, they would put down things like, I want the business to run without me. I want to feel less pressure. I want less emergencies. I don't want it to feel like we're always behind. I don't want it to feel like I'm doing everything. I don't want it to feel like I'm in charge of every project. I don't want it to feel like if I don't show up, nothing happens. And so, sure, putting a number up there is great, but like getting clear on what you actually want will really change things for you, not just in your relationship, but in any situation in life.
So do you have any, example of like any client or anyone you could share without like sharing their name, that's something that was truly life-changing for them when they did this exercise?
The woman who I was just talking about had been married before and single for like over a decade. And so that was completely life changing for her. But I think, I'm thinking of one specific business owner who was in our advanced coaching program who was truly overwhelmed in his business. And we had this list of 10 exercise and he had a really hard time with it. Here's why. We asked him what he wanted out of the business, and it was a question he had never asked. It wasn't even a thought process he'd ever entered into because he started his business in a place of scarcity. And by the time we were having this conversation, it was probably at like $2 or $3 million. His business was making a ton of money, but he didn't feel it. He felt insecure. He didn't feel like he had money. He didn't feel like he could spend anything. He felt like he was still completely like under massive pressure. And so it took a while. It took a while for him to come up with 10 things. But he wrote kind of some of the things that I said before. He said, like, I want to feel successful. Here he is, like one of the more successful people in our mastermind. He wanted to feel successful. And he wrote down he wanted to feel less pressure. And he didn't want to feel like he had to be in every meeting. And he wanted things to get done without him. And he wanted to be able to run the company without feeling like he had to micromanage. And he didn't want to feel like nervous on Sunday night that something was going to happen on Mondays. Like those were the things that came out. And it took us a while to draw those out of him. But when we came up with those things that he wanted in the business, then it was much easier to build the process and structure around exactly how to get there. And so for anybody who's listening, and if you're overwhelmed in your business and you feel like you are in that place that I just described, you can go like search Simple Operations on Facebook or just go to simpleoperations.com. I don't run the company anymore. My friend Gabe does, but he's amazing at helping entrepreneurs through this stuff, not just with the business side, but getting the business really clear so that you can start working on the personal.
Interesting. I would do this exercise and I'll definitely get back to you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear how it goes.
Yeah. Coming back to our next section, I'd like to more understand about you have these low points in business, you have these low points in relationships as well. What happens when both the things come together, and did something like that ever happen with you?
Like where we were having challenges in the business and challenges in the
Yeah.
relationship. Yeah, I mean, it happened over and over again. Because here's what happens with entrepreneurs, especially if you're running a company together. Katie and I were both working in the business. And so if things started getting challenging in the business, things started getting challenging in our marriage over and over again. And so because the business challenges drove marriage challenges, which is terrible. I
Hmm.
mean, now when I look back, I realize like we were doing it wrong. We were focusing on the wrong things because your marriage can be going great and your business can be in shambles. And there was actually a time in our lives where that happened. So in 2007, Katie and I got married in the early 2000s, and I shut down a company that I was running, and we kind of like both started doing other things, and we started running a real estate business. And we started buying and selling houses, and I was an investor and she was a real estate agent, and we did like tons of transactions with houses. We owned a ton of real estate, and we were like halfway to retirement, and in 2007 we got wiped out by the mortgage collapse. And anybody who was around back then knows like we lost millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars in equity and in cash, and we went bankrupt. And here we were in a situation where the business literally was a public like failure. We had to pay money to show everybody how much our business failed so that we could go bankrupt. But I'm so lucky I'm married to Katie, because in that period of time, she really held us together. She made us like say three things we were grateful for every night, and we aligned every day. And she like really leaned into those things. And so the momentum in our relationship actually overcame the challenge that we were facing in life. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't see it that way. You know, it's like the relationship's over here and the business is over here, and I need to put my focus here, and then I'll go over there when I need to. But when we coached entrepreneurs and we could get them to be like, okay, I'm going to like remove some of the focus on the business and really put some energy into the relationship, everything would get better.
So, what advice would you give to people, entrepreneurs like those, who actually focus a lot on the hustle part and not their relationships?
The advice that I would give to somebody who's just completely 100% focused on their business and not seeing anything else is that that level of pressure on anything, that level of focus on anything, putting everything into something sounds like it's going to work out. And sometimes it does. But oftentimes it makes it so that like you're not really experiencing the rest of life and you don't really understand what else is going on. And so it's okay to focus on your business. I did. But if you do that to the detriment of everything else, the business is going to suffer.
So, you feel like all other areas of life are equally important as working on your business?
I don't know if I would say they're equally important, but they're important. You know, I know, by the way, I mean, I did this. In my 20s, I ran what was a successful company. And when I say success, it's almost like I have to use air quotes because I made a lot of money, but I never felt like a success. You know, in my 20s, I had a company that started growing really fast. It was an international consultancy. I started just with myself, and then I ended up with offices in Latin America and offices in the United States. I had a large team. I was making money, but I was dying. I was 20 years old. I'm 6'2". I got to about 300 pounds. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't working out. I was focusing everything in the business. I was completely overwhelmed. And when I look back at that point in my life where I was making a bunch of money, but everything felt like it was horrible, that's not a time that I envy. That's not a time I look back and go, oh man, that was awesome. It's a
Hmm.
time I look back and I'm like, man, I was punishing myself. I was destroying myself. I was doing so much of what so many entrepreneurs today do. You know, it's interesting how many people speak to entrepreneurs and tell them that they have to hustle more. I've met very few entrepreneurs that need to be told they need to do more. But
Hmm.
I've almost every entrepreneur I've ever met needs to be told, hey, you don't have to do everything all at once and right away. And it doesn't have to all happen today. And if you slow down a little bit and you take care of yourself and you understand yourself better, you're going to make better decisions and end up in a better place. And I think it's a really hard way to look at like entrepreneurship, because the easiest thing to believe is I need to kill myself to make this successful. But the impression in the market that success equals self-destruction is really challenging. We don't have to do it that way.
But don't you think it is because of, how things are in society as general? Because the things that you actually get easily, you don't believe that, oh, how did I get it so easily? I should be able to work hard to be able to get big stuff, you know?
Yeah, there is a societal impression that we do have to work really hard to do things well.
Yeah.
But what happens is we take it too far. It's not working hard when you're killing yourself. It's not working hard when you're not sleeping. It's not working hard when you're not eating. It's not working hard when you're not taking care of yourself. What all those things is some level of self-hatred or self-loathing or self-frustration coming through where you are taking that out on yourself.
Hmm.
I think when you look at a lot of entrepreneurial success is driven by not really loving yourself. Now, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are terrified of doing any personal work because they think that motivation, that drive, that's going to change them. I heard the craziest story. You know, I've done breath work forever, and I had a friend of mine tell me that he met the guy who runs Wim Hof's breathing company. So Wim Hof is like a really popular breathwork guy. And the person who runs his company is his son. And my friend asked his son, hey, do you do the breath work? Like, you know, what do you think? And his son was like, no, I don't do any of that. I don't want to lose my edge. So here he is running a breathwork company for his father, who's like internationally known for breathwork, but he doesn't do breathwork because he's afraid of losing his edge. And what I hear when I hear that is, I'm afraid to process my trauma because I think that's what's making me successful. And I think a lot of the entrepreneurial world thinks that way. And if you want a coach to convince you to think that way, there's a million out there that will yell and scream at you and act like an angry dad or an angry mom and tell you how you need to do more and need to hurt yourself and work harder. But the reality is, like, if you're willing to like do some personal work and understand yourself, you can grow a business way faster. And by the way, this isn't an unqualified like theoretical opinion. This is factual. Like, we had hundreds of people come into our program. And like, here's what's even more interesting. We had people come into our program who were completely stressed out and had chronic issues. They had Lyme disease or Hashimoto's or chronic fatigue or Crohn's or colitis or IBS or something, some autoimmune issue. They also would have the issues of like mental health disorders, like they had ADHD or depression or anxiety or, you know, social anxiety or all these things. And what would happen is when we would calm things down and we would make things easier and show them how to focus on themselves a little bit, oftentimes those chronic diseases disappeared. We had one person who came into our program. I'm not going to use her name, but she confided in me early in the program that she didn't know what she needed to do because she had a chronic issue. She had like symptoms of Crohn's, colitis. She was actually, when she went to the bathroom, she was bleeding, internal bleeding in her stomach. She was having trouble eating. She was losing weight. Then she was gaining weight. She got into our program. She was in it for about 6 months, focused on some of the personal stuff, improved some things in her marriage, and the symptoms of all of those things went away. She'd been working with doctors for like a decade, calming her life down, stopping the hustle, putting more focus on what was important. All of those symptoms went away. And of course, her business exploded.
Just by breathing properly.
Not just by breathing, but like by slowing things down and understanding what she really wanted and putting process into her business and stopping the endless getting up every day and running like crazy, because that keeps your nervous system in a reaction. You know, the biggest challenge for us as human beings is our nervous system. If we have a dysregulated nervous system, we will have disease. Dysregulation creates disease, period. And for most of us as entrepreneurs, we live in a state of dysregulation. We live in a state of too much and going too fast and overwhelm and having to do the next thing. We keep ourselves there. When we keep ourselves there, our nervous system starts to show symptoms. And when we remove all that stimulation and we get to a place where things are more clear and we're actually focusing on what matters and we start seeing the results, our nervous system calms down, and so do a lot of those symptoms.
Makes sense. So if, let's say, you know, if you were watching this exact podcast when you were like 25, 26 years old, what's the one thing you would actually say to that Alex?
Yeah, if I could go back and talk to my younger self in my 20s, I would tell myself, you're about to meet the most amazing woman in your life. Just focus on her and everything else will be easier. And I believe that. For men, like, if we're willing to have a relationship where we create a level of devotion and we lean in and we take the triggers from that relationship and we go process them, we become more present, more aware, we become stronger, we become like deeper in our masculine, we become way more powerful in the world. And so if I could talk to my younger self, that's what I would say. I don't know
Hmm.
that I'd want to change anything though, because I feel like Katie and I today have like the best marriage of anyone we know. And everybody tells us that. Like, it's not just me saying that. All our friends tell us that. We have people come to us for advice. I was on the phone this week with a couple here locally that are having some marriage issues. And in the last couple of weeks, I was able to talk to them and they're clearing some of those things up. You know, for me, it's amazing what happens when you first find the right relationship and then second, put energy into it. Everything in your life gets easier.
Something to really think about for me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're doing this podcast where you are. My wife was 26 when we got married.
Yeah.
And I think these days, you're not alone. These days, so many women have been convinced that, the faster you can go out and make money, the faster you can create a business, the faster you can create your own success, your own stability, the better. And by the way, I don't necessarily disagree with that. But I think what's happened is that equation has gone so far that finding someone and getting into a relationship and being grounded and having that person who loves and respects you and who mirrors you and who shows you what's going on and who can stabilize you and can do the things that you said, like hold space for you and help you feel fulfilled and not solve the problems, but listen to you. Like those things are so crucially important. And if you have that in your life, everything in your life gets better and easier.
Right.
When I look at the most successful businesses I ever coached, by far, were the ones where it was a couple who was in a relationship that validated and held each other, and the business grew.
It's just a byproduct.
I think it's symbiotic. I wouldn't say it's just a byproduct. It's not like magical that the business grows, but if you put time into the relationship and you have security there, it makes everything easier.
Got it. So before we, like in this podcast, I really do this fun segment, like a small rapid fire with all of my people. And,
Okay?
I have a couple of questions for you, 4 to 5, specifically related to relationships, and you just like answer them just like that, whatever comes to your mind. All right.
Okay.
Would you prefer a movie night, like would you go out to a club or would you like to have a movie night with your partner?
I definitely stay home.
What's your love language?
Mine's quality time.
What kind of quality time? Like any example?
I love spending time with my wife. So my love language is like present and aware of quality time. I think one of the biggest issues in relationships is that we don't actually have a lot of connected time together. When you look at statistics, the average couple only has 31 minutes face to face every week where they're not distracted.
Hmm.
And so for me with Katie, it's like we sit down and we align every morning and there's no distraction. It's like intentional time and attention. If you want to create intimacy, the only thing that creates intimacy is intentional time and attention. People think of intimacy as sex. Sex happens way before you get into the bedroom. You create intimacy through intentional time and attention, and then sex is extraordinary. And so for me, spending time with Katie in the morning or going on dates or taking her somewhere or, every day we sit down in what we call a ceremony and we spend like, half hour, 45 minutes, sometimes an hour together. Like those things for me are the most important things for me.
Got it. So let's say you take Katie on your first date again. What would you do?
I don't think I would change anything. Our first like real date was Katie flying out to Florida and staying with me. And we stayed in the first couple nights and then we went out the third night, but it was just really about us. For me, the first date was like really getting to spend time with her.
Awesome. And thanks a lot for, like sharing this with me. I learned a lot of things today. Hopefully, the first thing I'm going to implement is like write down those 10 things that you want for my personal goals, for my health, for my relationships, for my business, and get that clarity as soon as possible. Really.
Yeah, it's a game changer if you do.
Yeah. And thank you so much for joining us today. And if you ever need any help or if there's anything we could do together, I would be always happy to open and hearing about it.
Sounds awesome. I really appreciate
Yeah.
your time today.
You too. Thanks a lot for adding, like you changed a lot of perspective on so many things that I was thinking about in general, to be honest.
Well, that's awesome. I appreciate that. And I'd love to hear like how that perspective shift goes and keep in touch and let me know.
Yeah, definitely. Hope you have a great day then.
You too.
Yeah. Bye-bye.